to welcome everyone here, and I love that everyone is having a fun time getting to see people, as the kids say, IRL. So happy to see you. My name is Lisa Osenka, and I'm the Executive Director of the Louisville Metro Housing Authority. I'd like to welcome you here today as we honor and recognize the 2+ decades long service of our beloved chairperson, Mr. Manfred Reid. And I'm going to invite up to the stage, and so I welcome you all, and thank you to Louisville Central Community Center's Kevin Fields for inviting us here to celebrate Mr. Reid and his decades and decades of accomplishment. And now I'm going to invite over to read Mr. Reid's bio, so you all can see all the amazing things that he has been engaged with through those years. Our Public Information Officer, JELISA CHATMAN.
Hey, folks. So I'm here to read Mr. Reid's bio. Be aware that this is very condensed, because if we had to cover everything that he's done, all the highlights, all the stories, we might be here all day. And we got things to do. So just know that this is not the full story, but it will give you a scope of this man's impact on the city of Louisville and Louisville Metro Housing Authority. So Manfred Reid Sr. was born in 1936 in the eastern Kentucky town of Lothair. At 8 years old, he moved to Louisville with his parents, Leroy and Lilith Reid. Leroy and Lilith encouraged Manfred and his two siblings to never back down, despite any odds against them. Reid has 4 children: Manfred Reid Sr., Angela Denise Hollingsworth, Karen Johnson, and Sharon Johnson. Reid graduated from Central High School and attended Kentucky State University and Bellarmine College, now known as Bellarmine University. He kicked off his career as a real estate salesman in 1963. Reid eventually earned his broker's license and became the owner of a thriving real estate company. But these details of Reid's life changed in 1968. On May 8th of that year, a white police officer in Louisville's West End pulled over black schoolteacher Charles Thomas. Seeing his friend harassed, Reid approached the officer, who proceeded to beat and arrest both black men. Reid sustained several injuries from that attack and spent a night in jail. The officer was suspended, but not for long. He was reinstated by a civil service board 2 weeks later after his suspension, leading to protest in the city's black commercial district at 28th Street and Greenwood Avenue. During these protests, the Commonwealth's attorney indicted Reid and 5 other black Louisvillians for criminal conspiracy. The Black Six was accused of plotting to blow up the West End chemical plant oil refinery. A judge acquitted the 6 in 1970. However, the events of 1968 left long effects on the city of Louisville. In addition, Manfred Reid Sr. walked out of the courthouse in 1970 with little to nothing: no home, no real estate license, no business. But he persisted, just as his parents taught him those years ago. The unforgettable experiences of the late 60s and early 70s directed him into the role of community and affordable housing advocate. Reid moved into Beecher Terrace in 1988. By this time, he had joined several civil rights organizations, including the Southern Conference Educational Fund, which sought to promote social justice in the American South. Reid was also working as a paralegal and construction contractor, taking on small projects for LMHA. A neighbor encouraged him to attend a Beecher Terrace resident council meeting, and not long after, Reid was elected council president. As it goes, no one's surprised there. Here, he spearheaded outreach efforts, including the Kentucky Harvest Food Distribution Program for LMHA residents. To this day, Reid preaches that housing policies must develop residents as much as infrastructure. Reid's successes as Beecher Terrace Council president led to his recommendation to join LMHA's Board of Commissioners in 1999. He has served as board chair since 2000. For 22 years, Chairman Reid has proudly taken on the task of chairing all board meetings according to LMHA bylaws, representing the agency at public events, and working with LMHA executives to ensure the agency's goals are met. Reid is the 2016 recipient of the Dorothy Richardson Award for Resident Leadership by NeighborWorks America. The next year, he was honored with the Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Award, highlighting Americans who have dedicated their lives to promoting justice, peace, freedom, nonviolence, racial equity, and civic activism. Once upon a time, Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher, who is here with us today, described Reid as a man of ideas and a man of action. Chairman Reid has taken advantage of his role to discuss the importance of diversifying low-income communities and updating these areas with the latest technologies. His ideas have helped LMHA update and replace nearly all of Louisville's publicly owned housing complexes, including Beecher Terrace, where he still resides today. Although Mr. Reid's time as LMHA board chair is ending, he won't be backing down anytime soon, as we've learned. We at LMHA are positive that he will continue to use his voice to advocate for low-income communities and influence his neighbors to do so as well. So before I pass the mic, I do have some more remarks from folks who couldn't be here today but wanted to share some kind words for you, Mr. Reid. The first is from Ray Parks, president of EJP Consulting Group. Manfred Reid is a remarkable leader and steward for LMHA. I was delighted to work with him to help develop the Russell Transformation Plan. Next, remarks from Kylene Hashim with Choice Neighborhoods. Manfred, you have been absolutely invaluable to the Russell community and in your role at LMHA. From the very first HUD site visit for the Choice Neighborhoods Planning Grant, we could tell you were a true force for the community, and we have seen you work tirelessly on their behalf. Thank you so much for your service, and best wishes for the next chapter in your life. So now we'll hear remarks from two men who have worked closely with Mr. Reid throughout the years. First, the photographer of the day, where is he? Working somewhere, here he is, Mr. Clinton Bennett. And then, after he's done, Honorable Mayor Greg Fisher will step up to the podium with a very special presentation.
Thank you. My name is Clinton Bennett. I'm not a spokesperson. I'm just a close friend of Manfred Reid Sr. and his family. The Housing Authority and Mr. Reid have been entwined in my life, all of my life. I was born in Beecher Terrace housing projects 72 years ago. And once my parents were able to buy a house, we moved out and lived on Cecil Avenue. And once they got a divorce, we moved to Southwick housing projects. So I went from Beecher Terrace to Southwick housing projects. And that's where I met Mr. Reid. He was my next door neighbor. And he was like a father figure, a mentor, a counselor, you name it. Mr. Reid had an influence on my family tremendously. And I followed Mr. Reid all of my life. He got me my first job at Cosby Realty. Lakeland Cosby, who's Kevin Cosby's father, had a real estate office. And Mr. Reid hired me there to clean the floors, to clean the office. And they paid me $4 a week. And that was a lot of money back then. But the influence that I got from working there, seeing independent black men wearing shirt and tie every day, going to work, earning a living. And they would come back to the office in the evening and they would talk politics and talk about life and women and whatever. But just being around them influenced my life. I always wanted to be a businessman after that. And when the riot broke out in '68, I was down on 28th and Dumanel. I don't know if I cleaned the office or whatever was going on, but I was there when it happened. And that was the end of my career. Plus, at the time, I was a senior in high school also, so it was time to leave anyway. But I stayed in touch with Mr. Reid throughout the years, and most of the time, people think as the riot is a single event, but it impacted his life forever. When I met him, he had a family. He had Angie and Manfred Jr. He had a good life, and he just started in real estate, and he bought many houses, and he had moved out of the projects and was doing well. Because at the time, that was during the white flight. All the whites were leaving the West End, so that was a boom market for real estate. But I saw the after effects, and you talk about from 68 to 88, when he first moved into the housing projects, that's 20 years. 20 years, he lived as a nomad. He couldn't find a job. He couldn't support his family. It ended up that his family broke up, and he was just living off the streets, really. But he did it with honor. He was never begging for anything. He set up shop. He gave legal advice, and for a fee, you can get any kind of advice you want. He had law books. He was it's hard to explain what type of work he did, but that was the type of work he did for 20 years, trying to make ends meet. We have had some good experiences together. Our families have been close. Me and Mr. Reid went to the Million Man March together. That's been over 20 years ago. We went to Africa together just 2 years ago. About 2 or 3 years ago, we went to Nigeria, and we stayed with an African chief for 3 weeks. And he was treated as royalty over in Africa. But that's all I want to say. She only said I had 3 to 5 minutes. I was going to say Mr. Reid has been an inspiration in my life. He still is an inspiration in my life. And I owe much to him. Thank you, Mr. Reid.
Before I start, I just want to recognize all the members of the board and the staff at the Housing Authority. You all do amazing, life-transforming work each and every day. I know it's one of the proudest things with the chairman over here to be associated with you all. So I'm going to talk a lot about him right now, but before I did that, I just wanted to say thank you to you all for the wonderful work that you do here in our community. Well, this is a great honor. I told the chairman that I was looking forward to this day, which kind of came out wrong, you know, because not that he's transitioning off the board, but the opportunity to honor this guy who's had such a singular contribution in so many ways in our city. And it's not often that you can point to somebody and say that this person made such a significant difference in the life of so many people here in our city, and I would say around the country as well. So it's a pleasure and it's an honor to be here today, that Louisville, after years and years of the chairman's efforts, is to make the playing field bigger, better, and more even for all in the past, the present, and the future. I just can truly say I've never quite met somebody like him before, that's got this enormous set of gifts and is just always moving forward in the community. So I want to just take a look at one part of his life, and it's a very important one to be sure, but this is a guy that's had a lot of chapters in his life. I don't know what the title of the book would be, something like Born to Do Good or Born to Help Other People, and there's a lot of just great chapters in there. So the chapter I'm going to focus on is his tenure on the Board of Commissioners for the Louisville Metro Housing Authority. Manfred's work on behalf of some of our city's most vulnerable residents is just simply Hall of Fame material. But we've gotten so used to being around a guy that's in the Hall of Fame that we don't ever want to take it for granted. Think of the number of the people who have been served by the renovations that he headed, the choice neighborhood grants he worked so hard for the city to receive, the vouchers that help people buy houses, the scholarships that help kids further their education and enhance their futures. And he always just did the work because it was the right thing to do. It never was about him, it was always about everybody else. And then bringing all this incredibly current free internet in hundreds of apartments during the pandemic, a time when people really needed that tool for school and their jobs. And then even further back than these decade-spinning milestones, it was talked about. It's an important part, obviously, of his life and the life of the city. In 1968, when several weeks after Dr. King had been assassinated, Manfred did not hesitate to put his life and his honor on the line in standing up for a friend who was being unjustly harassed by a police officer And so what happens to that good deed? Well, Manfred gets beat and arrested too. And that could have turned into a life of bitterness. But no, it did not at all. Injured, Manfred was also jailed. The officer was suspended for a short while, as we heard, and then reinstated, leading to the protests that are now famously known in our city here at 28th in Greenwood. And then Manfred and 5 others who became known as the Black Six were unjustly indicted on charges of criminal conspiracy. And by the time he was acquitted, and of course we would later learn that they were all framed, he and the city bore long-lasting effects. Manfred lost his real estate license, his livelihood, and so much more. But he did not become bitter. We had a community conversation, I guess about 3 weeks ago, Mr. Chairman, on the Black Six. A couple hundred people showed up. It was a very moving recounting of the history of our city. And I asked the panel during the Q&A session if the city had ever apologized to the Black Six for being framed, unjustly arrested, lives upturned. And they said, well, no. And so, I was not the mayor then, but it's these institutions of government that so often have led to injustice in our communities, and specifically in our Black communities. So I took that opportunity to then, while I was not the mayor then, to apologize to the Black Six. So again, I just want to apologize again personally. That's not enough for what you and others went through, but the least the government that framed you should do. They should have done it then, but if not, we'll do it now again. But think about if your life was upended like that, what path you could have chosen to take. A path of bitterness, cynicism, or a path of hope and helping each other. What a life lesson for all of us. So Manfred never quit. He never gave up. And he once, famously said, my parents taught me that when you fall down, you get back up. Never stay down. You have to continue to strive forward. So that's what I did. And how? This is a look at his civic involvement after he got back up. Board chairman for Neighborhood Place Ujima and Neighborhood Development Corporation. Director of Youth Build, West Louisville Performing Arts Academy, Louisville Central Community Centers, Louisville Family Health Centers, the H. Temple Spears Assisted Living Facility, and Passport Health Plan. A member of the Policy Advisory Council for the Kentucky Housing Authority and St. Stephen Church, and a Meals on Wheel volunteer. Incredible. So, it's kind of breathless when you think about it. In closing, I want to think of just kind of the breadth of his impact from what I shared above, and I can envision this good-looking brother, warrior on Broadway, stepping in to protect his friend. And then we were together 3 years ago launching Wi-Fi for the entire Russell neighborhood. And it just hit me that in 54 years, Mr. Chairman, if you had thought in that incident in 1968 that some half a century later you would be standing 4 blocks away as the chairman of the Housing Authority announcing free internet for all of the Russell neighborhood. And I just say that in that obviously 54 years ago we'd had no clue what the internet was. But when you think about the arc of his life and what all that means in those 2 different events and what doing good does day after day, it's just phenomenal and a real source of inspiration for each and every one of us. I certainly know it has been for me. In 2017, when I awarded him the city's Keeper of the Dream Award, I think that's the highest award the city gives, Martin Luther King Keeper of the Dream Award, I described the chairman as a man of character, a man of ideas, and yes, a man of action. I said then now, and I say now, how I am really proud to call you my friend. You have impacted my life in such a positive, loving way. I really appreciate that. And I'm beyond proud and honored today to present him with a city proclamation in honor of his work on behalf of his fellow Louisvillians and a key to our city as well. Manfred Reid, Sr. forever will be known as the chairman for his tireless efforts to make life better and more equitable for every Louisvillian throughout his exemplary life of public service. On the day he is honored for his work with Louisville Metro Housing Authority, we note he has brought experience and wisdom to all his involvements, giving him a unique credibility that is simply invaluable. He has never failed to stand up for equality, equity, compassion, and justice in every aspect of human life over the course of his long and richly lived life. Our heartfelt thanks and best wishes always to the chairman, Manfred Reid, Sr. We have a new special key to the city. Believe me, I don't trust many people, so I don't give this to many people because it's got special powers. So you're the first recipient of this key to the city.
This is a great day, but it's a great day for the Housing Authority. The Housing Authority is in transition now to broaden its commitment and its services to people in the neighborhood. When I say people in the neighborhood, I mean the Louisville, Jefferson County community, all of it. We need housing production in the area of greatest need, and we want to be able to expand production from Pleasant Ridge Park to Portland, and that will cover all the 4th, 5th, and 6th class cities outside of the city boundaries. We also want to provide training for our youth to develop the skills that's necessary in modern housing construction. We have to be able to replace the construction industry that existed in our community in the 1960s. And today we don't have any builders, commercial builders, in our neighborhoods. And we've lost the ability through our educational system to provide skilled training for our youth in order that they might enter into the construction industry at higher wages. So the Housing Authority looks forward, based on its Board of Commissioners and under the direction of our most competent Executive Director, Ms. Osanka, to move toward restructuring housing as we know it today in terms of home ownership and full participation in works programs that will come as a result of the triggering mechanism that will be brought about by the Housing Authority. We do not intend to get into the business of housing or nonprofits. We do intend to encourage entrepreneurship among the people that we educate and train in order that they might provide the leadership that's needed in order to build a better community. I want to thank the staff at the Louisville Metro Housing Authority. Y'all have been praising me today, but all the praise needs to go to the staff, the people who do the work, the people who advise me and aid and assist me in carrying out my duties. I intend to remain active with the agency and to begin to provide whatever they ask of me in order that we can continue our expansion and our growth. I also want to express my most humble thanks to the mayor And I thank the city of Louisville for the opportunity to stand up from my trials, put myself to work, and make a difference. I hope that you are pleased, and I'll be there for many years to come.
So, Mr. Reid, we wanted, on behalf of the Louisville Metro Housing Authority, and I know you got the key and the proclamation and the awards, all that, but we wanted to give you what we think is critically important to your 20-plus years of service as our chairperson, a gavel that you can place on your wall so that you can remember fondly all the times when we wouldn't be quiet.
Thank you. It's great to be here to celebrate this occasion with Mr. Reid, because as Clinton mentioned, that 20-year span, 68 to 87, resonates with me. And then beyond that, that 20-plus years of Mr. Reid being on the board at the Housing Authority, and a good deal of that time being the chair of the Housing Authority board, that resonates with me as well. So I want to say on behalf of Louisville Central Community Center, our board, who's represented today by Mr. Floyd Smith, who's over here, and our staff, in addition to serving as a commissioner for Louisville Metro Housing Authority for 20-plus years, a good chunk of that time, Manfred Reid also served on the board of directors of Louisville Central Housing Authority. And so I would be remiss if I could not have an opportunity to say on behalf of our organization, thank you for the great service to our organization as well. A good chunk of that time you worked with my predecessor, Sam Watkins, and I know if Sam were here today, he would want to, be a part of this expression as well. So I'll be sure to make sure that I let him know all the great things that have happened. But when Clinton talked about between 68 and 88, it reminded me of when I first met Manfred Reid. And if I could just tell just a quick story about that time in my life and in my career, I had was shortly graduating out of engineering school. I had been working at the airport back in the days when we were building new airport terminal buildings and new runways. And I got pretty proficient at designing and building concrete systems, roadways and bridges and so forth. But then I came to work at Louisville Metro Housing Authority in '86. And I grew up in Beachy Terrace. And so that was a homecoming for me to come to the Metro Housing Authority. At that time, we were the Housing Authority of Louisville. I remind everybody of the days of Hal. And I'm sure there's some folks from Hal that remember that time. But I remember within the first few weeks of being on that job as the assistant maintenance director, walking through Beachy Terrace, the neighborhood that produced me and raised me, and being so disappointed at the conditions, because on a rainy day at that time, it was not uncommon that residents would have to wade through water and mud just to get from their front door to a car. It was, the sidewalks had sunk, and there was so much erosion, and it was not uncommon to have to walk through the mud. And one of the first things I said is, we got to do something about that. So being empowered to do something about it gave me an opportunity to go and plan a sidewalk replacement project and put out for bid that, and working with the finance group, Wave's team, and Dave Kelly at the time, we put together a contract. And I remember the low bid at that time was Cosby and Cosby. And that was another good friend of Manfred, Walter Pete Cosby, who just passed away this past Sunday, by the way. And so I hired Cosby and Cosby to do this $100,000 concrete sidewalk replacement project. But just replacing the sidewalks wasn't enough. We had to elevate the grade for the new sidewalks, because otherwise it would still be underwater whenever it rains. So having that engineering background, we brought in a survey team and we elevated the sidewalks. And then we realized we had created another problem because we didn't have the grade matching, the concrete grade matching the grass. So I talked to Pete about that. I said, well, you're going to have to do something about that. We're going to have to bring some topsoil in here and fill that in because we can't have concrete sitting above grade. And he said, I got a solution for you. And the solution became Manfred Reid. And that was my first time meeting Manfred Reid. And we went into business. We went into the topsoil hauling and dumping and grading business, right? You remember those days, Mr. Reid. And I must say, after all the accolades, I don't want to rain on your parade, but we had to stay after some things to make sure that job got done right. And then we got that done, and it wasn't but a few years after that, being called into Will C's office, who our beloved brother, who was head of operations and HR at the Housing Authority for many years. And he said, I want to ask you a question. He said, I know you had a chance to work with Manfred Reid. He said, what do you think about Mr. Reid? And I had to pause. And because, I remember that time we were hauling dirt and grading, I said, well, if you stay after him, he's all right. But Will said, well, we're thinking about him being a board member. What do you think about that? And I said, well, I think that's a great idea. And so to see what has happened in that 20-plus year span, going through all that you've went through with the Black Six, and I just wanted to end with just a treat for you. Pete passed, and we're going to be giving him a homegoing on this Saturday over at St. Stephen. But I've got on the phone another Pete Cosby, your nephew, who wanted just to say congratulations to you. So, Pete, are you there?
Yes, I am. To my uncle, to my friend, to my mentor, I salute you, Brother Manfred Reid. And I think it is fitting that you started elevating dirt and grass and you continue to elevate lives. I can't even articulate the words to say how much you've been to me and my family, as well as the African American community. I'm on the road traveling, but I just thank you for all of your great service to that community. It goes without saying.
Thank you, Walter.
All right. Love you, Brother Reid.
Love you too. We love you too. All right, Mr. Reid, I just want to make those gestures and just say we're proud of you. Walter's on his way in town. He'll be in town tonight. He's on the highway. He lives in D.C. He's heading back to bury his dad this weekend, your partner, and I know you'll be there for him as well. So thank you, Lisa, for the opportunity.
What loving tributes to an extraordinary person. Thank you, Mr. Manfred Reid Sr. So thank you all so much. Thank you, and God bless.